Welcome back to a Celtic State of Mind. It seems like ages since we've covered a league game, guys. We just play back-to-back Champions League games and stuff like that these days. I'm Paul John Dykes. I'm joined today by Chris McElwain, who has been holding the fort for some time. So thank you for that, Chris. And also Sean Connolly back in Australia. And we're ready for an away game, and you're wearing an away jersey. And, when we talk about away jerseys, Celtic wearing the change kit the other night against Aston Villa. Was that the first time we wore that? First time
it's first time I remember it anyway.
Yeah.
Curious. But and look, we always complain that they have these strips that never get worn, so it's good in that sense. Positive in that sense.
Brilliant to wear the camo strip in homage to our history when it comes down to the songs that we were getting stick for singing, etc. But that's maybe a discussion for another day. Chris McElwain, we've got the team for anyone who hasn't seen it. Let's run through that straight off the bat. Schmeichel's in goals. The big man who, I tell you, I've seen a couple of wee kicks gone astray, but what a signing he's been. Unbelievable. Big saves in big games. Tony Ralston, the one, the only Tony Ralston at right back. I'm going to come back into the room here just before I move on. Whilst you were presenting the Villa game, Chris, I was doing it live at Barras Art and Design. And Lawrence was with me, the big fella. And obviously we didn't bring in Robbie Keane into the discussion. But we did run a short competition just to get the crowd's energy levels up before kickoff. And there were some good prizes and all this kind of stuff. And I asked the question, and I was testing the crowd to see if any of them listened to Acsom, who is my favourite player? Half the room didn't know. There you go. He starts today, Tony Ralston. Left back, Greg Taylor. Do we have another one? Well, I'm not having skills playing there if he's injured. Carter Vickers and Trusty, centre-half partnership. You move into the midfield. Callum McGregor, the 500th club man. He is making his 500th appearance today. Unbelievable, really, when you look at how long it took him to make his first. And he will line up alongside Luke McKeown, Rio Hatate, and then up top, we have Kuhn, we have Maeda, we have Ida. Interesting bench, Sinisalo, Johnston, Scales, Jota, the returning Jota, Yang, Nawrocki. That is like yin and yang, I'll tell you. Nawrocki, Kenny, Engels and Bernardo. That's the bench. Let's talk about it. We'll start with the defence. What do you make of it? Johnson getting rested tonight, Chris? Listen, that's what rotation's all about.
I think it's possibly the right time to do it. He's played a lot of games. He's been on good form for large parts this season. I think he'd probably benefit from the time out. And you bring in a player, and I know he's your favourite. The one thing about Ralston, he's dependable, right? I mean, he is dependable. He's one of those guys that I don't think you'll ever get an awful performance out of him. I don't think he'll ever be quite the spectacular player in the team, but he does a job when he pulls on that jersey. Very, very honest type player. And could be, away games for Park, could be quite a physical match. So, you need that little bit of grit that the Bricky brings. So looking forward to seeing what he can do. Wider in defence, you see Carter Vickers coming back. I think you can never view that negatively. Obviously, his fitness is always going to be a concern. I think he's going to be one of these players that we do have to manage at times, but he just brings so much to the table. That sense of assurance, that leadership. I think that positional maturity and the defence. And I do think whether it be Trusty or Scales who plays alongside him, I think they benefit from that. And he does elevate the players around him. So great to see him there. Left back, we're not going to stop talking about left back position until somebody comes in. I mean, we've seen Valle going out. Obviously, there's been mixed reaction to that. Some people felt he didn't maybe do enough to merit his place. Other people thought he was really starting to show promise. I'm kind of very much in the middle. I'd like to have seen more of him, but I'm not sure he did enough to displace Taylor overall when you consider what Taylor brings to the team. I get your point about Scales coming in. I mean, I think Scales is a player who can come in, and maybe if we're on the back foot, particularly in Europe, and we're trying to hold on to a game or hold a lead, I think he gives you that aerial presence and that physicality. But I agree with you. I wouldn't see his full-time role as being a replacement left back. So I think that's an area where, well, there's still some time in the window we should be looking at. By all accounts, we're getting Tierney in the summer. Doesn't look like we're going to get him in time for this window, which I think is a shame. So what do we do in the meantime? Do we trust youth? Do we go with the Scales? The Scales argument, or do we take the risk at not having an established left back to support Taylor? And it's not even competition; it's about what happens if Taylor gets injured.
I don't think you can. That final, that final solution, as it were, I don't think should be on the table, Sean, because Liam Scales for me has never excelled as a left back for Celtic. Yeah, he's played there, but all his best performances have been at centre half. I do think there's a CCV influence, and I think I previously called it the Van Dijk influence, where it's an effect of having someone so good at centre half that their partner's always going to be in their shadow, a la Denier. And I'm not comparing Carter Vickers to Van Dijk, although I would like to see the two of them playing together in the hoops, but that's not going to happen. Carter Vickers and Trusty's your first picks, and Scales for me is your backup centre half. We still need a backup left back. We have, as Chris rightly said there, we've actually allowed Baye to go back to his parent club to be re-loaned out, and Bernabe has left the building, so it's left us really short. There might have been something in that Baye deal, Sean, in relation to minutes played. I know that clubs have that underwritten where you start getting charged if you don't play a player over a certain amount of times or give them an amount of starts. I know that's a function within loan deals. But anyway, he's gone. He's left the building. We are left with Taylor, a player for me who's playing out of position in Scales if he plays left back. And then you're going down to guys like Montgomery, who was on the bench the other night. Not the best situation. And again, we know that Tierney is coming at some point. It could still happen in January. I think it would be quite sensational if it did, because obviously we would need to pay probably a hefty fee for him for that last 6 months. But I think it's a risk to run without a recognised left back. And then what do you do, Sean? Do you bring in a temporary situation? Do you bring in a loan player at the risk of, in the summer, losing both Taylor and the loan player? It's not the best position to be in, is it?
No, it's not. But we know we've got a replacement for Taylor lined up, so it's really about A and other at the moment. I think there's been a lot of hand wringing and reflection on this transfer window. If there was nothing done other than Jota coming in, we'd all be saying that it's been a great transfer window. Think back a year ago, the only player we signed was Kuhn. Then we brought in Ida on a last-minute loan. The problem with that last-minute loan was we didn't write any option to buy into the loan deal, and that really came back to bite us. So when you do these things last minute, that's what happens. And to be honest, look, if Baye hadn't, when Baye first played his first game against Falkirk, there's a lot of Celtic fans were even happy to never see him again. And now we developed that player into a player who has a lot more fight and grit and is a better player for what he's done here. And we're sad to have seen him gone. He's weakened the squad. Just 2 weeks ago, Rodgers was saying he wouldn't be leaving if there wasn't someone coming in. Well, he's left, and there's no one coming. So that's put a lie to what Rodgers said. We can only assume some circumstances changed, but it's looking very much like this window is feeling like it's been bad because Kyogo and Baye have gone, and those were the players, number one striker, number two left back, and there's been no sign of a replacement. And it looks like we're going to be scrambling for a last-minute loan to replace them. Yeah. The other thing we identified for the transfer window is we wanted an upgrade on Yang and/or Palma at wing, and we've got one of those two things so far. Palma's out, Jota's in, so cool. If that was the only thing we'd done, we'd be saying this is a success. But the board are bulking it, breaking the transfer records for Fitzgarden. I don't know, is it going to be any cheaper in the summer? Is it going to be that some of the money they're asking for is going to be commuted over to future fees rather than upfront fees? It doesn't make sense to me. I feel like they're going to be asking for the same fee in June or July, even if they're currently saying it's because it's mid-season. It doesn't feel like that's honestly the case. The only teams that have really got an excuse for holding on to players at this time are teams that are still in Europe. And well, actually, I'm assuming Bromby aren't in Europe at the moment. I should have checked that. But so yeah, I don't technically believe that. I think they're going to be looking for the same money in summer, and we're just being priced out of a fight where Spanish and German teams are sniffing around and they know they can get more money for that reason.
It's frustrating, and it's match day, but obviously when we're talking about the starting 11, we are going to veer into transfer window chat, and there's loads of that type of chat coming through. It's always a pleasure to see you coming in to the comment section, every single one of you. Thanks for getting involved. As always, we've got Thomas Burns, a famous name. Let's focus on getting the win today. We can wait until tomorrow to see how the transfer window ends, as long, Thomas, as the recruitment team headed by Paul Tisdale isn't waiting until tomorrow, and everything's lined up nicely, and we can start seeing it filtering through on our socials. Are you confident? Let us know in the comment section. Always a pleasure to see Paddy Lavery. I still have faith that Trump will tell us that there are aliens living among us. Well, that is definitely going to happen, Paddy. Whether or not we're going to get another left-back and striker is up for debate. But the alien thing, that's going to happen. Jay Conley, Jay Larkin, afternoon all. I was so naive when I said 10 days ago the club must be about to sign a forward when we sold Kyogo. At 53, you think I'd know by now how we operate. The Kyogo situation has been spoken long and hard on Acsom all season, really, Chris. You know, we started talking about it in the summer. That was prior to him signing his new deal with the agency. Obviously, there was a touting mission, Man City. That story broke, nothing in it. The MLS story broke, nothing in it. We knew that, you know, we now know he had been pushing for a move because Brendan Rodgers told us that. Whether or not Sean believes him, I don't know. But I do. I believe Brendan. So Kyogo, we knew, was leaving the building. I think we've had our eye on maybe 2 targets who have been in the press recently. And you know, that interest has been covered by what we would class as kind of credible sources. You know, when Anthony Joseph and Steve McGowan and these guys start talking about it, you think there's something in it. But it seems at the moment that we might be moving to the third interested striker. We don't have anyone lined up. Not only that, your backup, one of the backups, Daniel Cummins, he's on his way out the building by the looks of it. West Ham making big moves for him. What I would say before we get into the Kyogo striker chat is I don't see the Cummins situation being exactly like the Vata and Kelly one, in that Cummins was not offered a deal before he entered the last 6 months of his contract. The other 2 players were, and they knocked it back, either through their own decision or probably in consultation with their agent. They knocked it back, and then the English teams got involved. You can talk all day about whether or not it was the right move for the players. One's at Watford, one's at Millwall. This young kid was never offered a deal prior to the 1st of January. So if we lose him, we've only got ourselves to blame. But it does leave us just with Ida, maybe Maeda, who has been spoken about in those terms, although Rodgers says that's not a long-term plan. And all you'll have left after that is Johnny Kenny, a guy who's played 1 game of football for Celtic, and it was a substitute appearance. So we've already said left back's no ideal, up top's no ideal either. Is it, Chris?
No, it's not. I mean, the Kyogo loss was always going to be a tough one to take. I think, you know, you mitigate some of that by bringing Jota in. You know, you're selling a favourite and bringing a favourite back. But they're not like for like, right? I mean, you bring Jota back, he's he's not coming in to replace Kyogo. So you're left with the, you know, Aramida, who, you know, the manager's got clear faith in and has already started to repay that faith, I think, with his performance the other night. But the issue you've got with Kyogo is you've got Maeda, who's been so effective on the left wing. Well, you know, yes, he can play as a striker, but then again, you're leaving us light in options at left wing. It'll take Jota, as much as, you know, I'm his biggest fan, it'll take him a long time to get fully up to speed, I think, by his own admission. So what do you have? You've got Johnny Kenny, as you say. We've seen a substitute appearance, very looked promising, but it was 1 substitute appearance domestically, and then we've not seen him since. He's on the bench today, might get some minutes, but he's still very much an unknown quantity at our club and at this level, and certainly, you know, if you're looking at Europe as well. So, you know, you see the transfer speculation. You see Kvitsgarden, who we seem to have been linked with for the best part of about 2, maybe 3 windows now. You've got Ian Atchell, whose name I probably butchered, but you know.
But you said it with confidence, so we believed you.
I'll go with that. Yeah, so just let that one roll. But you know, does he fall into the category of good signing, similar to Kasper Schmeichel, or does he get negative connotation? It's Brendan's notebook again. You know, he's Brendan's address book. So, and again, it looks as though that one's started to fire out now. So it's like, well, where do we go? Australic, I think, is one that was linked again. Is that lazy journalism because he's played against us in Europe this season for Bratislava? So you're kind of thinking, you know, come on, where's the new emerging, you know, striker targets that we need? You know, all seems a little bit lacking in imagination to an extent, and we're what, just over 24 hours away from having to have someone in if we're going to do it. Look, I would like nothing better than Johnny Kenny, for example, to make that step up. I mean, we know he's a finisher, right? I mean, if you can finish, I think if you can consistently bang in goals, even at a lower level, I think there's something there. And surely you think coming into Celtic, particularly with Kuhn, with Jota, with you know, Hatate starting to up his game again, you think, well, you know, he's in a great position to get service. You know, if you can get similar service to what Aramida got in the last game, maybe he'll actually step up and actually we'll unearth something. But it's a risk. It's a big risk, and I think it's a big risk in the eyes of the supporters, particularly when we're so financially well off at the moment. We do have money that we can spend. We don't just have to consider the next round in Europe, because we've got to qualify now when we finish this season. So, we should start looking at how do we bed players in. It's a difficult one. I appreciate it's probably a difficult position for the club. Maybe they don't want to pay over the odds for players and be held to ransom. Maybe they feel we're in a better position in the league this season, that we actually don't necessarily need to take the chance and up in the squad. I'm not sure how you sell that one to the fans. I'm not sure I can sell it to me, let alone the fans. So,
especially if we don't win the cup. If we don't win the cup,
absolutely. And the Kenny thing, it's nothing against the player. He's only played a substitute couple of minutes against Ross County. You go into a game against Bayern München, as someone called it in the comments. I don't know if that was Alan McAnally and his burner account. And you are left with that as a consideration. Then I think that's poor planning, right? And it's nothing against the player. He's hardly kicked the ball. Everything he's done's been elsewhere. He's done it for Shamrock Rovers and previously done it for Sligo Rovers. He's at a point of Brendan. Listen, you're saying I don't think the fans would be happy. Do you think Brendan would be happy with that? Going into Bayern Munich?
Think not. You'd like to think not. I mean, when I was on with Jim on Friday. Jim made a point of, had we got what would be perceived as a more favourable draw and something you think you could absolutely, have a high degree of confidence, you'd absolutely go out there and win across the two legs. You would say there's real merit in going out and spending the money, because getting through pays it back immediately, right? And you're getting players in for the following season. I kind of agree with that view to an extent, but then it doesn't matter that it's Bayern Munich. I mean, okay, they're a team with a lot of prestige, but should we not, because of what we've done in Europe, should we not be going in thinking we actually have a chance here? I mean, until those two games are played, we could go through. In Europe, we could if we just. Everybody's on their game. We turn on that disciplined performance. We've got the crowd behind us at Celtic Park for the first leg. And as John Hartson said, great position to be in. You put in a cracking performance against Bayern, and you've got something to hold on to when you play the second leg in Germany. I know on the surface of it seems unrealistic, but surely that's why we're in this competition, is to go and try and show what we can do.
Yeah, it's unrealistic if you go in underprepared. And if you're undercooked, then it's unrealistic. So then I think if you do that and you go in and you're not tooled up adequately, then you're basically accepting, we'll be lucky to get through and that'd be great. And we're just here to participate rather than compete. Sean, it's natural. Obviously, we're focusing on today's game. It's natural that transfer talk's going to come in. There's lots of nice positive things in there. CCV starts the game. McGregor is playing his 500th game for Celtic, which is sensational. Only 13 players in the history of the club have made as many appearances as that. Jimmy McGrory wasn't even one of those players, but he could score more goals than he played games anyway, so no one really pointed that out. He's not on the list, which is crazy, because we're only counting what is now perceived as competitive football matches, League Cup, Scottish Cup, Europe. Europe and the League Cup didn't exist in Jimmy's day. But the Charity Cup and the Glasgow Cup were seen as competitive fixtures, and they're not now. So it's a bit unfair on guys like Jimmy. I've got to give him a shout out, and others. There's others as well who would be in the list if these games were included. But Callum McGregor, the captain, he starts. Maeda comes back in, having been suspended during the week. So there's lots of positives to focus on as well. And of course, there's a certain subject of Mr. Jota on the bench and seeing him being reintroduced. Do you play a second debut? Surely a debut is just a debut.
Would it not be his third, since he was on loan, then he signed as a permanent, and then he's come back again?
How many debuts can you play?
Apparently 3, at least. No, I just caught a side eye of him there on the TV coverage, and his hair looks resplendent.
Oh, yes.
Feathered to within an inch of its life. I didn't know that human hair...
Enough about Chris.
I'm expecting a shift from Maeda. He's had a good break, and he won't be playing next midweek. So, full shift from him. Today in midweek against Dundee, expect no less, and he should be feeling that, that we always talk about competition breeds higher levels of performance. Well, Jota's there now. He's breathing down his neck, and hopefully he shows that. You'd have to say Maeda is a front runner for one of our players of the year, especially with Kyogo leaving. The front 3 looks very dangerous. I'd actually expect that when Jota does come on, it'll probably be for Kuhn rather than for Maeda. But we'll see. You know, we don't know how these things are going to play out. McCowan coming into midfield. I think Engels put a real shift in midweek. I was actually pretty annoyed at McGregor. I know he's 500 games, sensational. I think I've got about 7 or 8 years on McGregor, and I've probably not played 500 games all in. So, you know, he's played more games than me in less time, and he didn't even start till he was 2021 when he started playing for Notts County. So it's an excellent achievement. He has been very consistent, but I thought he was man of the match for me against Young Boys, but I thought he was the worst player in a Celtic jersey against Aston Villa midweek. So it kind of goes like that sometimes. And I thought Engels was doing a lot of work covering for him against down in Villa Park. And I think Engels really deserves a rest for that reason. So I'm hoping that McCowan will be. I'm expecting that McCowan will be the one that really steps up today and is a bit of a difference maker. I think he'll score at some point. And I think Motherwell managerless, and I think Lennon Miller is still injured. So I think without Lennon Miller in the middle, that's where the game will really turn. I think McGregor, they might man mark him, they might not. I don't think it'll matter. I think everything will kind of come through him, but I think it will be McCowan that makes the real difference. And maybe potentially Hatate, and whether Bernardo comes off the bench or Engels comes off the bench. I think that's where we're going to see our joy. I think Motherwell's seen a lot of injuries, no manager, and we should really be dominating this midfield.
Yeah, without a doubt, for anyone who's not seen the Motherwell team, here we go. There's a starting 11 there. And when you're looking at that, as you say, the Lennon Miller thing, that's gone quiet, guys, isn't it? You know, we were one of the front runners, or we were interested at least in Lennon Miller. Not much chat around him coming to Celtic now. I don't think that would be a priority in any case. Obviously, Andy Halliday, you know, Brendan Rodgers rates him as a pundit. I don't rate him as a player. Don't come back to haunt me, Andy. And Stephen O'Donnell, former Celt, who came through the academy system, of course, and made his name playing as a consistent right back for Motherwell. And, of course, making that breakthrough into the Scotland squad. You've got Tony Watt on the bench. He gave us one of the most famous and most enjoyable victories that we've ever enjoyed, talking to young Celts coming through the youth academy. It's a difficult one, and you hold on to what Brendan says, Chris, because, you know, he has focused on this a number of times, and it's like he sticks to his guns on this. He'll decide when you're ready, and if you're 17 and ready, he'll play you. He gave some examples of that. So what he's saying is the guys that haven't played at 17 are not ready to play. They're not up to the standard. And you know what? He was reiterating what he said around about the time when people were talking about Rocco Vata, you know, this time last season. And we're now talking about Daniel Cummins. I feel sorry for Daniel Cummins. You know, I think throwing him in the other night was, you know, can I even use the name Ben Doak? Remember, we threw Ben Doak in against Rangers. It was almost as if this is what you could have if you stay here. And it all felt a bit too little, too late. Yeah. And the player left in any case. Certain circumstances led to Ben Doak leaving as well. But it's frustrating as a fan because you want to have everything, you know, joined up. I know that sounds like a kind of corporate wanky thing to say, but you want to have the youth development feeding the first team. But we're in a situation at the moment, and it's not as Celtic's making, where they don't play competitive football. So you've got a youth player. The only way you can try them is by putting them in a Celtic team, and we demand a win every single time we play, even in the Champions League. So it is very difficult. And Brendan Rodgers has asked the question time after time after time. It looks like we're losing another one in the shape of young Cummings, unfortunately. It leaves us short, but you know what? Maeda is something that he could come through that situation and end up showing us what he can do through the centre. A combination of us not having a backup and the fact that Jota will come up to speed. Even at that point, Rodgers isn't happy with that. He's already said it in his conference, isn't he?
He has, yeah. And I think your point on youth development is really pertinent. As the senior club in Scottish football, as the one with we're the best run club, we've got the maximum resources. You know, we should be leading the line when it comes to youth development and bringing players through. We're hamstrung by the lack of competitive football at a youth level, you know, the lack of a reserve league, the lack of a platform for these players to go and you know, have a proving ground. Because as you say, you bring them in at the first team, the expectations on our club that we don't get free hits at this club, as we've said many times, whether it's in the league, whether it's in the cup, whether it's in Europe. Every game is, you know, the pressure on to win and the pressure on to perform is huge. And even some of our senior players struggle with that. So it's very, very difficult for us to give that opportunity to a young player. Now, I understand there's a sink or swim element, but that's very easy for us sitting here to say, as a young player, and we saw it with Dane Murray, thrown in at the deep end, in the Champions League game. And, and listen, I portion very little blame to Dane Murray. Yes, okay, it was what you'd consider a fundamental mistake. But by God, going into that cauldron under those circumstances, under that kind of pressure, that's not a safe environment for a young guy. And I really hope that he recovers from that. But yeah, you've got the loan market to tap into. You've got, affiliated clubs that you can maybe leverage to try and get these guys, some game time. Maybe you do the scales thing, send them off to, play at an equivalent level, like an Aberdeen or, Motherwell or whoever. But the opportunities are few and far between. And I think, we don't know what happens in terms of the pathway and the youth development, but there must be a threshold that we need these players to hit to say, okay, you've earned your spot here to come into the first team. You've earned the manager's trust to be part of that squad. And it must be, certainly from what we can see, it must be a really, really difficult threshold to break into. And from a manager's perspective, right, your job and your livelihood rests on every decision you make. So the pressure to get it right must be immense.
There's also the big question around how much does the manager know at a certain point. Now, the reason I bring it up, the manager didn't know Dembele was making his debut for the so-called reserve team at the age of 13, right? Or the youth team at that stage, under 19s, at the age of 13. He didn't know. He was unhappy with it. The manager didn't know. I'm talking about a different manager now, about Ben Doak, 2 weeks before he's made his debut, even though he was being described as Scotland's answer to Wayne Rooney at the age of 15. Manager didn't know that he was progressing to a point where maybe he should be in and around the first team. And it was by chance that he was told, not by the academy, about Ben Doak 2 or 3 weeks before that game. It was a stroke of luck that Kieran Tierney got that call up, because when Ronnie Dyla and John Collins asked them for a left back, they were presented with 2 other left backs to take on tour. So you've got to say, right, where's the problem here? The problem's in the youth academy. That's where the problem is. They're not identifying some of these guys. Callum McGregor never made his debut to the age of 21. At what point were the academy banging down the gaffer's door saying this boy's ready to play? So, it does. It frustrates the life out of me, Sean. And on the Dane Murray one, it's interesting that Nawrocki's on the bench today, Sean. That's an interesting one.
Yeah. I think he's probably Dane Murray's probably hitting a bit hit to his confidence after what happened at Villa Park. Yeah, and it's a shame. I would have liked to see Dane Murray more involved. But the way it's gone, Scale, like if there's an injury at centre back, Scales comes on. If there's an injury at left back, Scales comes on. Unless there's an injury to a left back and a centre back, Nawrocki's not seen the pitch. So it's I don't know. I think probably it's just to protect Dane Murray, maybe give him a run for the B team or whatever it is. I don't know if that's allowed. It's very unclear what the rules are for the Lowland League and B team players. And Murray can no longer play for anyone in Scotland apart from Queen's Park, so I guess he's staying unless he's going back to Queen's Park. So it is a surprise, but hopefully he stays in first team training if he is here, and hopefully he does get another chance, and it's not, that's not what gets hung around his neck is the death knell of his time at the club.
No, without a doubt. You're looking at the league table at the moment. Celtic, of course, 10 points ahead with a game in hand. Rangers are in action today. Their game kicks off at 3 o'clock at Ibrox against Ross County as well. I'm looking at that table. We've had a resurgent Hibs and Hearts. And the wheels going off the Aberdeen train. They're not going to be finishing second. But when Hearts, because you would expect now Motherwell in a wee bit of disarray with the manager walking out on them for reasons that have been well publicised, it looks as though Hearts will catch Motherwell, I think, when you're looking at that realistically. And then you're looking at that top 6, Celtic, Rangers, Dundee United, Aberdeen, Hibs and Hearts. First time in a while that the 6 teams that I always regard as the 6 biggest clubs in Scotland are actually the 6 at the top of the division. And I think it's down to the 6 clubs collectively to do something about a reserve league reintroduction, because it comes down to money. That's why we scrapped it in the past. Thanks everybody for getting involved. Wishful thinking, PJ. You talked about the aliens, Brian. I'm not sure. And there's Bayern München. There you go, Stevie. I knew this was a burner account. It's Big Rambles. And Dr. Paul, calls him the football Dr. Paul Tisdale. Anyone who gives himself a nickname, I've always got a bit of concern for that. Holland's called himself the governor. Never liked that. Danny Boy, is Jota on the bench? Yes, he is, and hopefully we'll see him on the wing at some point. The only thing for me to do now is to get a wee prediction from the guys. I'm going to start with you, Chris. Give me our predictions for today's game.
I'm feeling quite positive about today. I think it might just be the return of the Portuguese wing wizards. So I am going to go for 4-0. I think it's going to be a double for Arameda. I think one for Maeda, and then a late cameo from the man Jota.
4-0, nice and confident. Sean, what about yourself?
To stick with what I was going to predict, not be influenced by Chris, I will say 4-1 to Celtic.
Okay, and I'm going to go for 3-1 Celtic. Thank you everybody for getting involved. Go and enjoy the game and join us at half time on a Celtic stage.